42 million.
The art world, where paintings change hands for fortunes.
Sold, thank you very much.
But for every known masterpiece, there may be another still waiting to be discovered.
My God, there's a lot at stake with this one.
International art dealer Philip Mould and I have teamed up to hunt for lost works by great artists. We use old-fashioned detective work and state-of-the-art science to get to the truth.
Science can enable us to see beyond the human eye. I don't believe it.
Every case is packed with surprise and intrigue.
It's like a challenge. Who am I?
But not every painting is quite what it seems.
Just the sort of thing you might associate with a faked painting.
It's a journey that can end in joy.
It is indeed by John Constable.
Oh, brilliant.
Wonderful.
Or bitter disappointment.
The work is not by Henry Moore.
So sorry.
In this episode, could this beautiful landscape be a work by one of the giants of Impressionism, Alfred Sisley?
I can't believe that he would have sat here and painted our painting.
If he did paint your painting.
If he did paint our painting.
It looks the part and it bears his signature, but there's a catch. It's already been examined by leading experts.
And the answer they came back with?
Was no.
The quest to find out the truth about the picture takes in the darkest chapters of the Second World War.
This painting went through one of the most horrifying times in our recent history.
Can cutting-edge technology help solve the mystery?
There's nothing that you've said here that suggests this can't be by Sisley.
It's possible, certainly possible.
Can we gather enough evidence to prove the painting is genuine?
There are enough similarities for us to be excited about Kim and Chuck's painting.
Or have we stumbled into the web of a master forger who's tricked the art world for nearly a century?
Someone had put a Sisley signature on top.
Yeah.
Dastardly.
We received thousands of emails requesting help to investigate artworks, many of them from abroad. Occasionally, one just has something about it which warrants further investigation. Hello, Fake or Fortune team, it says. I'm writing about a painting that I think would be a good prospect for your show. My husband and I purchased an oil painting signed Sisley at auction in 2014 in Illinois. I believe it was presented as in the style of Sisley and had an interesting handwritten letter glued to its back. Now that Sisley is Alfred Sisley, a contemporary of Renoir and Monet. Alfred Sisley was one of the founding members of the Impressionist movement in 19th century France. The Impressionists rejected conventional ways of painting. They escaped the artist's studio and worked directly from nature, experimenting with light and colour to capture a mood. Born in Paris to English parents, Sisley made several visits to Britain, painting a series of landscapes in London and Wales. In a career spanning 40 years, he created over 1,000 works. During his lifetime, Sisley never gained the recognition he deserved, and he died in poverty. Today, his paintings sell for millions. Could this charming landscape be a long-lost work by the artist known as the English Impressionist? So, this in itself is not enough to go on, but it is intriguing. And Philip had a look at a picture of the painting that they attached to this email and got so excited about it, he's jetted off to Miami to see it. And sitting here in cold, dark London, I can't help thinking, he's done rather well out of this.
In the art world, sometimes a photograph is insufficient. And if the stakes are high enough, you need to see a painting in the flesh. That can take you anywhere. And if it happens to be sunny Miami, all the better. I've arranged to meet Kim and Chuck.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Chuck.
Hello, Philip.
Lovely to
Come
be
on in.
here.
They've retired and now divide their time between their hometown of Chicago and here in Florida.
And here it is, Philip.
Well, so we have a sort of picturesque French scene. It looks like a river, lots of reflection, a big blue sky, choppy water, And then, as you focus in, buildings in the background. And on the left, what looks like a boathouse. In other words, a quintessential, picturesque, impressionist scene. Just the sort of picture you would expect by Alfred Sisley. So how did you come by it?
We were at an auction just outside of Chicago in around 2014, and we were mesmerized by it, and the price was within our range, and we purchased it.
And what was that price?
Approximately $2,600.
So sort of a couple of £1,000 all in?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So how was it described in the sale when you bought it?
Well, in the auction catalog, it said, "in the style of Sisley."
So in the style of means that it evokes the work of Sisley, but it's not by him.
Well, we were hoping, but it wasn't the reason that we bought the painting.
Have you done any research into its provenance?
Yes, after the sale, we contacted the seller to see if she could give us any information. And she did tell us that her grandfather brought the painting over from Germany after World War II. His name was Ernst.
It's helpful to have a head start with the provenance and a name, Ernst, to look into. But anything travelling through Germany during the Second World War will require very careful investigation. What did you do next in order to try and establish the artist?
Right after we had purchased it, we did take it over to France to see if we could get it authenticated.
You thought it might be right?
We felt that the style was very similar to other Sisley paintings we had seen.
And the answer they came back with?
Was no.
The fact that the painting was rejected by the Sisley Committee, a panel of experts who specialise in the artist's work, is discouraging, but it's not the end of the road. The committee had concerns about the signature, so when Kim and Chuck brought it back to the US, they took it to a restorer.
They cleaned it, and they took off some of the overpainting that had been placed on the painting.
So there was paint on the surface that they removed?
Yes, and it was then that we saw that the Sisley signature became very clear, yes.
Ah. And did the picture change in any other way through cleaning and restoration?
There was a very thick sheet of varnish on the painting that had yellowed and become very dirty over time. And when that varnish was removed, the colors just jumped from the surface of the painting. It was night and day.
Cleaning has dramatically improved the picture, not only revealing the fresh colours and distinctive brushwork, but also a clear signature. There's quite a lot riding on this. I mean, if one could prove that this was a genuine work by Sisley, value £250,000 or in excess of that. If not, if it is just an imitator, well, you didn't pay an awful lot relative to what it could be worth, £2,000. I don't think it's going to be worth much more than that, possibly less.
Mm-hmm. That's a chance we're willing to take.
Well, whatever happens, I do hope we can get closer to the truth about this intriguing painting.
We appreciate your effort.
Mm-hmm.
While Philip spends more time examining the painting in Miami, back in London, I want to familiarise myself with Sisley's work to see where Kim and Chuck's painting might fit in. I'm on my way to the Courtauld Institute in London, a museum and research centre with one of the finest collections of Impressionist art in the world. We've been given a rare opportunity to examine two authentic works. I'm meeting Anthia Kalen, world-renowned Impressionist scholar, to see if she can spot any similarities between Kim and Chuck's landscape and the genuine paintings.
Aren't we fortunate? Two Sisleys, and they're both out of their frames. This is such a rare privilege. And two from the 1870s, about the same period. What I love about this scene of Louveciennes under snow is how he's managed to get the contrast of the trees, the large, tall trees in the foreground, taking us into the composition.
This picture is much more similar to Kim and Chuck's for obvious reasons in that it's depicting a river. And the thing that immediately strikes me is just the drama of this sky.
Yes, it's very typical of Sisley. The wonderful low horizon, but leaves a huge sky which dominates the whole landscape. And notice the way, as you say, he applies the colour very loosely and broadly.
And this is a big departure from the kind of art that people were used to before.
Well, certainly for landscape painting.
So when it comes to Kim and Chuck's painting then, I mean, there are similarities that occur to me. I mean, when you look at the boathouse, for example, and the very sketchy way that's portrayed, but you can still see what you're looking at, the timber here in front, the building. There's definitely a similarity there, would you say?
Yes, yes, more thinly painted here, because I suspect more rapidly painted.
The paint on Boats on the Seine is more thickly applied. Kim and Chuck's feels like it was completed in a hurry, so it's less finished. But the techniques are reassuringly similar.
But other things like just the little daubs to indicate the roofs of the buildings in red here. And you just see these little flecks here.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Very, very typical, very typical. There are enough similarities I think, for us to be excited about Kim and Chuck's painting.
Back in Miami, I need to have a really close look at the painting, so I sent it to a fine art conservation studio. I'm meeting conservator Bitsy Cooling.
Hi, Bitsy.
Hi.
Well, I have to say, it's great to see this picture for the first time liberated from its gold frame and out from behind the glass. It looks a rather different picture. Now, with your conservationist's eye, how do you respond to this?
Well, looking at this, it's a lovely painting. There are various elements to this that would suggest that it was painted en plein air, so outside, based on the quickness and looseness of the brushstrokes that we're seeing.
Now, moving to the bottom left-hand corner and the prominent signature, what do you feel about that?
I would actually describe this as being kind of nicely tucked away. He did like to kind of keep his signatures subtle. They'll be in the corner somewhere.
So Sisley didn't like to overly brand his pictures with his signature?
No, that didn't seem to be his style.
So what about what it's painted on?
So this is painted onto panel. Painting on panel is unusual for an Impressionist artist.
Mm-hmm.
So on the back of this panel, you can see that there are these bars attached to the back. It's called a cradle. These are to prevent warping in the panel.
So cradle panels being expensive things, unusual for an Impressionist painter to use?
Yes, exactly. It is very unusual.
And then, of course, there's the label, isn't there? I mean, quite a big one.
Yeah, quite a big label. It has suffered some insect damage, as you can see.
It's indistinct, but it has the name Kunsthalle Bremen in the corner, which refers to a renowned art gallery in northern Germany, and it seems to be some sort of certificate of authenticity, written in German.
It's an interesting graphic lead.
I wonder what the Sisley Committee made of this label. It's definitely something we should follow up.
Needs more thought.
It's going to be a challenge, but I've seen enough to know that this painting is worth pursuing. I'm really pleased that I've now seen this painting in the flesh as opposed to from photographs. There's distinct qualities to it that are worth taking seriously. But this isn't going to be straightforward. Yes, it's been turned down by the committee, but I can't help feeling that Kim and Chuck slightly rushed into it. They didn't have all of their ducks in a row. And something has now changed. The picture itself looks different. It's been conserved. Now, it's quite possible that as a result, there will be things that are manifest which weren't before. Could it now be closer, as far as the committee is concerned, to a work by Sisley? We've got a lot of research to do, so I'm returning to London with Kim and Chuck's painting.
If we've any hope of convincing the Sisley Committee to overturn their decision, we need to understand why they rejected Kim and Chuck's picture. Back at the gallery, I'm updating Philip.
Philip, good to see you. While you've been gallivanting around Miami, some of us have been hard at work.
Sorry, gallivanting. I was working hard. Look what I've come back with.
Yes, well, that is something, I grant you. But what I have been looking at is the letter that Kim and Chuck were sent by the Sisley Committee back in 2015. And what it shows us is what we're up against. And basically, we have to reopen a case that has been closed. So the key line here is, unfortunately, in our opinion, the painting was not executed by Alfred Sisley.
Well, that sounds like a death sentence. What was their evidence for it?
One of their key concerns, they say, is a painting that Sisley did in 1888, which they say is a very similar subject.
This authentic work, entitled Moret-sur-Loire, depicts exactly the same view as Kim and Chuck's picture. The Sisley Committee say this genuine landscape probably inspired Kim and Chuck's painting, the suggestion being it's a mere copy. But perhaps there's another possibility, that Kim and Chuck's picture is a preparatory work, Sisley's first attempt at capturing this idyllic scene.
They also say that they think the painting is too monotonic, by which they mean the colours are all too similar, too limited a palette, with not enough contrast to be by the hand of the artist.
Oh, yes, but that was before it was cleaned. And actually, if you have a look at the image halfway through, with the dirty side on the left and the clean side on the right, you can see that it's almost as if a curtain has lifted.
Certainly the contrast is dramatic, isn't it? And the committee haven't seen this. The thing is, the letter from the committee is on the one hand discouraging. It lists all their reservations, but it gives us something to go at. And we've been there before with this same committee. Do you remember the Degas painting, the little ballerina we looked at? They had rejected this picture. We did our investigation, and in the end, we convinced them it was genuine. They have other reservations, though, in the letter. They go into some detail. They say, we couldn't find any cradled panel on any known works by Sisley, they mean, emphasising our doubts on the authenticity of this painting. And of course, this is what we're talking about here.
That's a bit more of an issue. We're going to have to look into that carefully. And science, of course, might help us.
The Sisley Committee has raised serious stylistic and technical concerns about Kim and Chuck's painting. We need to examine the work forensically, so I've sent it to the Courtauld Conservation Studio, a centre of excellence for the scientific study of art. I've arranged to meet Professor Riva Bernstock. I want her to take a closer look at some of the anomalies on the painting that were singled out by the Sisley Committee.
So, Riva, what's your first response?
In the corners, there are two little pinholes in each corner, which is interesting because it could suggest that it was maybe stored in a box with some spacers, so half painted, so that when the paint was wet, it could be transported in a special box.
Known as a pochade, this portable accessory was a must for any aspiring artist, allowing them to bring their studio to the countryside and transport a wet painting back in safety.
OK, so another indication, therefore, that it might have been painted out there in the outdoors.
It's one interpretation. And also, it's on panel, a cradled panel.
The wooden panel it's been painted on has been strengthened with strips of wood called a cradle to stop it warping. It's one of the reasons that the committee originally turned down the painting. There are no other Sisleys with a cradled panel.
But if it was cradled, it wouldn't be easily slotted into a box. I don't know whether the cradle's original or not. It seems unlikely if that's the case. It would have been cradled later.
Riva needs to undertake further research to try and establish whether the panel was cradled when the artist painted the work. If the cradling was added some years later to stop the panel bending, then we can rule out one of the committee's concerns.
It'd be quite good to look under the microscope now to see if I can see anything more of the pigments and the condition of the painting.
If you would, please.
What's really amazing is that all over the picture, wherever you look, you can see brush hairs embedded in the paint. And that suggests the artist used the brush very vigorously and some of the brush hairs broke off and just got stuck in the wet paint. Here's a really long one.
Sort of wildly attacking the panel. And what about the signature?
The signature was. This is red and mixed with black, probably, of the signature. So the paint of the signature is blended in with the wet underlying paint. Trying to avoid, there we are, there's a squiggle of the signature there, applied wet in wet.
This means the signature was applied before the painting had time to dry. This tells us it was done at the same time as the rest of the picture. What it doesn't tell us is whether this is the signature of Sisley himself or the work of a deliberate forger.
You've really created a sense of this coming into life, this picture so far. But is there anything more that will take us closer to Sisley?
I think what I really need to do is to have some time to look at this picture, to use different analytical techniques to confirm the range of pigments that was used and paints, to look at the structure of the painting to see what order it was painted in, how it was made, and that will take some time.
Well, that all sounds really encouraging. Any progress you can make is going to be helpful with this picture. You can see things that we can't.
I hope so.
While Aviva spends more time studying the painting, I'm keen to find out more about where Sisley worked. I'm traveling to a town southeast of Paris, which was a place of inspiration for the Impressionists, Moret-sur-Loire. This is where Sisley moved in 1880, living and painting here until his death in 1899. Kim and Chuck are over in Europe for a month, so I'm taking the opportunity to meet them. We're on a quest. We want to find the exact view depicted in their painting. Sisley mapped out the area through his landscapes. We're following his trail in the hope it will lead us to the right spot. We're starting with the most recognizable landmark in their picture, something that Sisley painted many times.
So here's the church, and look, it's pretty much unchanged from when he painted it in 1894. And we're standing in the exact spot where he would have stood to see this view.
Now we've got our bearings, we're heading out of the center to try and find the spot depicted in Kim and Chuck's picture. We can follow Sisley's paintings like a map.
So let's stand here where Sisley would have stood and painted this sublime view.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
And so much of it is unchanged.
Mm-hmm.
The trees are different. These have changed.
Right.
And the drama of the sky.
He was mostly sky, wasn't he? Sky and water. He loved sky and water.
I love the movement of the water.
Yeah.
But you can see the movement of the clouds and the movement in the leaves on the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And then contrast it with the stillness of the water here.
It's just beautiful.
Should we go a bit further down?
Absolutely.
Sisley said every picture depicts a spot with which the artist has fallen in love. He painted hundreds of paintings here in Moret, all containing many of the same elements. The river, the church, the bridge, but from slightly different angles. To get closer to the view in Kim and Chuck's painting, we need to move downstream.
So we're a bit further along the riverbank from the bridge. We're getting a little bit closer to where your picture was painted.
Yeah, you could see it's a different angle of the river.
You see a lot of the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
We saw two arcs before.
And the church?
Yes.
Always the church?
Always the church is the focal point. Those trees are gone.
We're definitely getting warmer.
Let's go a bit further down the riverbank.
It's over 120 years since Sisley painted here. While some of the views are more or less the same, a lot has changed, and further away from the town, nature has started to take over, making it harder to match up the views.
So I reckon if we position ourselves about here and look down the river there, I think this is exactly the spot. I mean, it's much more overgrown now, so you can't see the view so clearly. Look, if you look through those trees there, you see, you can just about see the arches of the bridge.
Yeah, and the church.
Mm-hmm. And this boatyard here is now a derelict building on the other side of those trees there, so we can't quite see it.
It's not hard to imagine Sisley opening his pochade case, taking out a fresh panel, and working swiftly to capture a summer's day.
And what this shows us standing here is that this is a real view.
Right.
Whoever painted this will have stood here.
I think absolutely. For all of the colors that are in the water, for the variations in the color in the sky, you would have to be sitting here to be able to capture that beauty.
And we know Sisley painted around here so much. He said he wanted to convey through his painting what he was feeling at the time. I don't know, what does this make you feel?
Pure tranquility. Pure tranquility. It's beautiful. I can't believe that he would have sat here and painted our painting.
If he did paint your painting.
If he did paint our painting.
It's been great coming here with Kim and Chuck, and it's brought their painting to life in a way that's completely different from just seeing it hanging on a wall. It's clear that whoever painted it must have stood here on the riverbank and looked at that view. They must have. And we know that that's exactly what Sisley did. He lived here, he painted so many views of his hometown and of this river. It's really encouraging. It's not hard and fast evidence, though. Encouraging, but we still need quite a lot more.
If we're to convince the Sisley Committee Kim and Chuck's painting is genuine, we need concrete evidence. I'm trying to track the provenance of the picture as far back as possible, hopefully to Sisley himself. We know Kim and Chuck bought the painting from an auction near Chicago in 2014. They contacted the seller, who told them they'd inherited the picture from their grandfather, a man named Dr. Ernst Donath, who died in 1983. So, who was Ernst Donath? Records show he worked in the US as a chemist and had emigrated from Germany after the Second World War. Is this how a painting bearing a German label ended up in America? Delving deeper, Ernst Donath's name appears in the records of a top-secret US intelligence program known as Operation Paperclip. He was one of 1,600 scientists recruited from former Nazi Germany by the US government after the war to work in military technology and the space race. Many were former members, some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. But not Donath. It turns out he had Jewish heritage. So precisely when did Ernst Donath leave Germany for America? And crucially, could he have brought the painting with him? To find out, I've asked the help of Professor Tony Kushner. I'm meeting him at the Wiener Holocaust Library in London, one of the world's leading archives of the Holocaust and the Nazi era.
I've been digging into the past of our painting and investigating one of its owners, Ernst Donath, who was a scientist in Germany during the Second World War, but then he was part of something called Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip was an astonishing idea of the American government to recruit leading Nazi scientists to help the American economy and the military after the war.
Ernst was in a very difficult position, though, wasn't he? Because he was part Jewish himself and was in real danger. He was something that was called a Mischling.
Ernst was a Mischling. He was a Mischling of the first degree, which meant he had 2 Jewish grandparents. And this put him at particular risk. In January 1942, the Nazis decide to implement the final solution, in other words, the extermination of all Jews. And they define what's going to happen to first-degree Mischlings as follows. Persons of mixed blood of the first degree will, as regards the final solution of the Jewish question, be treated as Jews. Any person of mixed blood of the first degree to whom exception from the evacuation is granted will be sterilised.
Oh, it's just utterly chilling, isn't it, to hear that and to see it written in black and white. And Ernst was one of the exempted, one assumes, because he was useful to the Nazis as a scientist.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't always work that way, but Ernst is one of the lucky ones who is fully exempt from that.
We've managed to obtain Ernst Donath's unpublished memoirs from one of his relatives, and there's a passage which could shed light on Kim and Chuck's painting.
We know from things that Ernst himself has written is that he definitely felt at risk. He talks about a fear of looting his possessions. He says, next to our shelter in the house in the sub-basement, we and others from our house had some valuables there. It's very possible, quite likely, that these valuables he's referring to include the painting we're investigating. Would he have had time in Operation Paperclip to get his belongings together in an orderly fashion, or was it the Americans would say, right, you're off, and 2 days later he'd have to leave?
I think Operation Paperclip was a very considered operation so that he would have had time. They would have selected him, he would have been approved, he would have had time to think about his belongings and his family. So the short answer is yes, he would have had ample time.
Passenger records show Ernst Donath boarded a ship on the 4th of January 1947, bound for a new life in America. It's highly likely Kim and Chuck's painting came with him.
If it was in his possession at the time, it would indicate that certainly that he thought this painting was valuable. It doesn't prove that it was a genuine Sisley, of course. But it certainly does show that this painting went through one of the darkest and most horrifying times in our recent history.
Any artwork that emerged from Germany after the war needs to be carefully checked to ensure that it hasn't been reported as stolen by the Nazis. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, they began to systematically seize property from Jewish families, and throughout the war they looted treasures across Europe. Today, there are comprehensive records of the hundreds of thousands of artworks that they stole. Kim and Chuck's painting is not listed among them, so we can move on with our investigation.
We need to track the provenance of Kim and Chuck's painting further back in time. So I'm following up a key lead, the label on the back. There's an address on it which reads Kunsthalle Bremen, a renowned art gallery in the city of Bremen, a cultural hub of northwest Germany. Hot on the trail, I've come here in search of evidence. The Kunsthalle Bremen holds an impressive collection of European art, including many works by the Impressionists. I'm hoping to find out why Kim and Chuck's painting has a label with the gallery's name on it. So I'm meeting curator Dorothy Hansen. Hello, Dorothy.
Hello, welcome to the Kunsthalle Bremen.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And I first want you just to have a look at our painting. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, at the first glance, it looks like a Sisley.
Good start. It's the label, however, that we are really interested in. How does that strike you?
Well, immediately I see on the top left, Kunsthalle Bremen. So it's printed. And so it must be the official paper on which the people of the Kunsthalle Bremen were writing in the, I would say, in the first half of the 20th century.
What else?
Well, we see the word gut, Gutachten. That means an expert opinion written down as a certificate. And the handwriting is very typical for our director, Emil Waldmann.
Emil Waldmann was the director of the Kunsthalle Bremen between 1914 and 1945. On the label, Waldmann writes, "According to my knowledge, this work is by Alfred Sisley." So how was he regarded? I mean, an opinion from this man, was that worth its weight in gold in the art world?
At that time, yes. He was especially interested in French Impressionist art.
That's a really warming thought, a proper, respected authority giving this a seal of approval. And what about the date? When was this issued?
On the top right, we can see two numbers. And I imagine it could be 1939. That would be in the period of his directorate.
The label confirms the painting is at least 80 years old, ruling out the possibility that it's a modern fake. Museum director Emil Waldmann even left instructions for labels of this kind.
Well, we have one letter of 1938, 1 year earlier, where somebody is asking for his opinion. And he says, please glue this handwritten certificate on the back of your painting so that it cannot be abused and taken for another painting.
Well, that's interesting insight, because it pretty well looks like that's what's happened to this label. It looks glued on the back, following instructions.
Yes, that's correct. This label belongs to this painting.
I mean, for us, this is really positive progress. Our painting is blessed by a man who the art world listened to.
Back in London, I'm trying to track the provenance of the painting further back from 1939, when we know the director of the Bremen Art Gallery deemed the work genuine. I'm following up a lead that Kim and Chuck have turned up after trawling through old auction records.
So have a look at this. This is an auction catalogue, and the date is 1931. And when you read through the artworks that are on sale, it's just an extraordinary kind of who's who of the greats. There are Renoirs, Matisses, Cézannes.
This treasure trove of Impressionists was assembled by Dr. Hans Vland, notorious as a key dealer of Nazi-looted art during the Second World War. Before the war, in 1931, in the Swiss town of Lugano, Vland held an auction where a very familiar painting was up for sale.
Vland had many paintings up for sale in this auction, including number 73, this one, by Alfred Sisley, called Moret-sur-Loing. So that sounds just like Kim and Chuck's painting. And when you look at the picture, there it is. Unmistakably, Kim and Chuck's painting.
Now we have documentary proof that art dealer Hans Vland put the picture up for sale in 1931 as an authentic Alfred Sisley. The question is, where did he get it from?
There was something intriguing about the entry in the catalogue that caught my eye, which is this asterisk here. And what that asterisk means is that Vland didn't own this Sisley. He was selling it on behalf of someone else. Was it Ernst Donath at the time who wanted Vland to sell it for him? We've looked back as far as we can into who owned this picture, and there's no record of it, not in 1931. So that is a blank. So where does this leave Kim and Chuck's painting? Well, what we can say is that Kim and Chuck's painting definitely existed as far back as 1931, and that is only 32 years after Sisley died.
We're edging the provenance further back in time, but there's no record of who owned the picture in 1931, and there's a worrying annotation in the auction catalogue.
This note here next to the picture says Fällt aus, which in German means cancelled, which is another way of saying withdrawn from sale. So this picture, Kim and Chuck's picture, was in the catalogue, but then taken out before the sale. Why? Were there suddenly question marks about its authenticity? And when you start looking at other paintings like this Manet, for example, number 71, here we are again, Fällt aus, cancelled, withdrawn from sale. That wasn't sold either. And that particular Manet is not in the current catalogue raisonné. Was this a fake? Were there question marks over this? And what does that mean for the Alfred Sisley picture, which was also withdrawn? Vland was clearly a very shady character, dealing in Nazi-looted art. He's clearly not someone whose reputation was of the highest order.
Our investigation has taken a troubling turn, and there's a worrying gap in the provenance between 1931, when Kim and Chuck's painting appeared in Wendland's sale, and the late 19th century, when Sisley was working in Moret-sur-Loing. It's the kind of gap that can raise alarm bells, and back in Bremen, I'm following up an ominous lead. Although Sisley enjoyed little commercial success in his lifetime, his reputation grew after his death in 1899. Might a forger have spotted an opportunity? Conservator Julie Thoren wants to share a disturbing discovery.
Hi.
This is a painting called Baumallee bei einem Städtchen, or Tree Alley near a town.
And it looks like a Sisley, doesn't it? Bright, crisp, green colours, pools of light, low horizon. So what's the story?
Yes, it came into our museum in 1937, and for a long time it hung as a Sisley.
So it was a fully accepted Sisley that hung on the wall here in this wonderful museum?
Yeah, all the time.
So what happened next?
In 2006, I discovered that Sisley signature is part of an overpainting, which is on top of another signature.
So the Sisley signature of the painting that you received
Yeah.
in the 1930s and had been hanging on the wall proved not to be right.
Yeah.
And what was beneath?
I removed the overpainting, and underneath there appeared a signature by Paul Vogler, which is another artist.
I can see it. So
Yeah.
A minor impressionist,
Mm-hmm.
not a painter of the same stature as Sisley,
Right.
had painted this, and then someone had put a Sisley signature on top.
Yeah. Right.
Dastardly. How did it feel revealing the signature? I mean, what did you think?
Yeah, I was surprised.
I mean, and you can see it quite dramatically. Is that the remnants?
Yeah. I started to remove the overpainting, and when Paul Vogler's signature was visible and part of the wrong Sisley signature is still there, we decided to leave it as a document of this history of this painting.
It's a sort of memorial
Yeah.
to the fake that this was.
Yeah.
That is a disconcerting thought. All this time, all that 70-year period, this picture was hanging in an esteemed museum, fooling the experts, a work thought to be by Sisley, but it wasn't. It's clear that a forger was active in the 1930s, passing off pictures by minor artists as those of the great Sisley. And it raises uncomfortable questions for Kim and Chuck's painting. Back in London, we've asked leading Impressionism expert Anthia Kalen to join us at the gallery. I want her view on whether Kim and Chuck's painting might be the work of an imposter, perhaps even a fraudulent copy of a known Sisley.
If you remember in the letter from the committee, Kim and Chuck's painting and this one that they mentioned specifically, done by Sisley in 1888. It's the same scene, and this is what worried them.
The Sisley Committee flagged up this known work as a reason for rejecting Kim and Chuck's painting. It depicts exactly the same view, which led them to conclude this genuine landscape probably inspired Kim and Chuck's picture. Could it be that someone copied this authentic work? If this is the case, then the presence of the signature is a huge cause for concern.
So why do we have the Sisley signature? That is a real problem. It's a real problem because it does suggest, in fact, that whoever painted the picture, if it's not Sisley, was intending to dupe.
But there's a less sinister possibility. Could Sisley have simply painted another version of the same scene?
Clearly, Sisley has a feeling that this is a perfect composition in some way. Why shouldn't he be returning to it? I mean, why shouldn't it be some sort of thought process?
And is that what Sisley did? Paint the same versions of the same scene?
Oh, absolutely. Under different lighting conditions, different weather conditions, different seasons.
And in different styles?
Some could be obviously more finished depending on what the artist was trying to do, and here that's definitely the case. If this is by Sisley, this would be a more finished variant of it. And there are other precedents for this too. Two further known works by Sisley, almost exactly the same scene, different times of day.
And actually, thinking about ours, Kim and Chuck's painting, like this one, is much looser and less finished. And then the known Sisley of the same scene is similar-ish to this one. Tighter, more finished.
Tighter finish, yes.
So that's encouraging, I'd say.
It is encouraging. It is encouraging.
I agree. And I think we need to bring some science to bear on this case, see where that takes us.
It's reassuring that there's a precedent for Sisley creating multiple versions of the same scene. But does Kim and Chuck's picture share the same pigments and painting techniques as other genuine works? Or will we find something rogue that suggests it's a fake? Back at the Courtauld Institute, Professor Riva Bernstock is continuing her technical analysis of Kim and Chuck's painting. She's using imaging techniques to reveal what the eye can't see. Infrared and ultraviolet light can uncover clues hidden within the painting. Riva is also using X-ray fluorescence, a non-invasive technique which is used to identify the pigments present. I'm hoping her research can answer a crucial question. How will the technical data from Kim and Chuck's painting compare to the Courtauld's own genuine masterpieces by Alfred Sisley?
It's good to be back, Riva. Have you had time to look at and study our picture?
Yes, I have. I've been lucky enough to have access to a comprehensive technical report and technical study by Emma Janssen, who is a graduate student in conservation, which has allowed us to make comparisons of great value to this picture.
And what has that turned up?
Well, it's interesting that the materials used for this painting are closely similar to the boats on the Seine, for example, which is 1877.
When Fiona and Anthia saw Boats on the Seine at the Courtauld Institute, they spotted some stylistic similarities. It's encouraging that Riva can back those up with technical similarities too.
There are some really interesting comparisons between the sky painted in the boats in the Seine and also the purple underpainting that's used in this painting, which seems to be something that Sisley used in the later part of his career. This sort of quite characteristic mixture of pinky purpley paint to mark out the composition.
This is really encouraging. Kim and Chuck's work is painted using an unusual technique that we know Sisley used. It's something we need to share with the Sisley Committee.
What about the pigments themselves, though, the materials used? Is there anything that we can match to Sisley?
We need to be sure that Kim and Chuck's painting doesn't contain any pigments that only became available after Sisley's death in 1899. For example, the pigment titanium white only became commercially available in 1921. If Riva has found any evidence of it here, there's no way Sisley painted the picture.
In fact, the pigments or the range of pigments used for this painting include vermilion, chalk, barium sulfate, viridian, cobalt blue, and other pigments that were used in the late 19th century. And there's nothing that really stands out as being 20th century, so there's no titanium white, for example.
Okay, so all the materials that we have in this painting are consistent with what Sisley was using?
Yes, the comparisons would suggest that.
Another result. Kim and Chuck's picture has all the hallmarks of a late 19th century Impressionist painter's palette. It's another reason for the Sisley Committee to take a fresh look at it. But one of their biggest concerns was the unusual crisscrossed wooden panel known as a cradle it had been painted on. Can technical analysis explain why it might have been used?
Some of the technical imaging, so the infrared image shows, for example, that there's a damage on the right-hand side and that there are splits, which maybe led to the panel being cradled.
Under infrared light, you can clearly make out the hard lines that reveal where the wooden panel has split, requiring a repair.
It's not really clear whether it was bought cradled, but it seems unlikely that it was bought cradled if it was slipped into a special painting box and used to paint on site.
If the wooden strips that form the cradle were added later and the painting was originally done on a simple panel, then this is good news. There are several examples of genuine Sisley works on panel, meaning Kim and Chuck's picture becomes less of an anomaly.
You're very good at finding reasons for paintings not being what we hoped for. But I must say, I'm encouraged by what you've just said.
With Philip feeling more positive about the prospects for Kim and Chuck's painting, I've come to Paris for a rendezvous with the Sisley Committee. They've agreed to review the case and examine the picture for a second time, along with our dossier of evidence. I've arranged to meet Kim and Chuck in the Saint-Germain district before we part with their painting. We have got the painting, we've got our dossier of evidence. So the next stage is to submit all that to the Sisley Committee. They are quite a secretive organisation, so much so that we can't even film the building where they work. And they will then look at it and come up with their verdict.
It's been a fun ride, a very fun ride, and we're anxious to see what they decide.
And are you feeling optimistic?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
Well, look, fingers crossed.
Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good.
With the painting safely lodged with the Sisley Committee in Paris, all we can do is wait. Back in London, we're taking stock.
Well, I think we've taken this as far as we can go. And thinking back over what we've learned, we had a mountain to climb.
The committee had made it very clear that they didn't like it, and they gave their reasons.
They thought the colours were too monotonic.
The cleaning of this picture has transformed it. It's almost as if the clouds have opened. We can now see everything in a sort of high key of sunlight.
They had concerns about the cradled panel.
Aviva has spotted cracking in the panelling. Now, that could explain the cradling on the back. It was added later in order to conserve it. And we do know that Sisley worked on normal panels. That's progress.
We have found enough fresh evidence to warrant the committee having another look at the picture. And we've charted the journey of Kim and Chuck's painting through the murky waters of Nazi Germany. And fortunately, it doesn't appear to have been caught up in that.
We managed to identify the label on the reverse. It's from a respectable museum. It's a stamp of approval in 1939.
And we managed to trace the provenance of the picture all the way back to 1931 in that auction catalogue. That's just 32 years after Sisley's death.
It seems to me now that we have done all that we can. We've reopened the case. We now need to see what they think of our appeal.
After 2 weeks of deliberations, the Sisley Committee have made their decision. Kim and Chuck are on their way to the gallery. We're all about to discover whether a painting they bought as a landscape merely in the style of Alfred Sisley is in fact a genuine work by the master impressionist.
Hello, Kim. Hello, Chuck.
Hello.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Are you ready?
This is it.
As we're ever going to be.
So I've got the verdict in here. How are you feeling at this particular moment?
Anxious.
So let me just remind you what's at stake. If this is by Sisley, a greatly rated and desired impressionist painter, it could be worth £250,000, quite possibly more. However, if it is not by Sisley, if it is by some imitator who's trying to make us think it's by Sisley, then I'm afraid only a fraction of that. A few £100, perhaps low thousands at best. So quite a difference.
Quite a difference.
Shall I?
Please. I feel like we need a drum roll.
Comité Alfred Sisley, it says at the top. Further to your request, the Comité Sisley has re-examined carefully the oil on canvas attributed to Alfred Sisley, Paysage à la rivière Moret-sur-Loing. We've noted that the painting had been cleaned, which has improved the visibility of the signature. New comparisons with original works have been carried out. A very careful consideration was given to the documentation provided. However, the Comité Sisley has decided to maintain the opinion expressed in its letter dated February 2015. The painting referred to here above will not be included in the supplement to Alfred Sisley's catalogue, Raisonné, now being prepared by the committee. We regret the disappointment which will greet these conclusions. Oh, Kim and Chuck, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, I feel the same way.
I'm so gutted for you.
Oh.
And also, we've been there.
We have been there.
We saw it and we loved it.
I'm a bit sad for Sisley, because I really did think that it was something that we were going to bring to light for the art world, but...
Yes, I mean, we certainly felt, didn't we, that whoever painted this went to Moret-sur-Loing and saw it. Sadly, according to the committee, not Sisley.
So your attachment to it is no less?
We'll take it home and put it back in its frame and hang it back in the place where it was, and we have a great story to tell about it.
I'm so disappointed for Kim and Chuck. You know, you'd think it would get easier after all these years on Fake or Fortune, but it never does. Reading out a letter with a verdict like that and seeing their disappointment, even though they were putting a brave face on it. They are just the loveliest couple. It was a joy doing this investigation with them, and I'm only sorry we couldn't give them the verdict they wanted. In the end, it was a huge disappointment for them.
The Sisley Committee's conviction that the painting is not authentic means the dark arts are in play. The fact that this work was signed Sisley and in 1931 made it into an auction catalogue masquerading as a work by the artist means it is a forgery.
We were dealing with the work of a really cold-blooded faker, someone probably long dead now, who sought to deceive and nearly got away with it. And although I feel really sorry, as you do, for Kim and Chuck, at least they were taken in by a professional, someone who knew what they were doing. And who knows, perhaps one day we'll be able to put a name to this faker. I mean, the story need not stop here.